I was already counting compressions when the general's voice cut through the room. "Corpsman, keep going. You're doing it right." For a second, no one moved. The music had stopped. Glasses hovered mid-air. My father stood 10 feet away, a crystal tumbler in his hand, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at anyone. I kept my hands locked, shoulders over my wrists, pushing down hard and steady. 1, 2, 3. The woman beneath me, late 60s, maybe had gone pale. Her pearls were twisted against her neck. Someone had tried to loosen her collar but hadn't known what to do next. Most people don't. "Call 911 if you haven't already," I said, not breaking rhythm. A man in a gray suit nodded too quickly. "Already did. They're on their way." "Good, stay back, give her air." I tilted her head, checked for breath again. Nothing. No rise in the chest, no response. 30 compressions, I said quietly to myself. Then breaths. I'd said those words 100 times in training. Intense, in dust, in rooms that didn't look anything like this one, with its chandeliers and polished marble, and a string quartet that had gone silent in the corner. I counted again. 1, 2, 3. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been holding a tray. That's the part people remember when they tell the story now. Not the woman's name, Margaret, I learned later. Not the way the room smelled faintly of citrus and expensive whiskey. Not the way my hands ached afterward. They remember the tray. My father had placed it in my hands himself. Just help with the drinks, he'd said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He hadn't raised his voice, he never did, he didn't have to. He'd looked me up and down first, my uniform pressed clean ribbons, aligned shoes polished until I could see the reflection of the ceiling lights. Then he'd smiled just a little the way he used to when I was a kid, and he thought I didn't understand something. "Glorified medic," he'd added just loud enough for the couple beside him to hear. "Let's not make a scene tonight." I remember the woman next to him giving a polite laugh, not unkind, just agreeing with the tone of the room. I didn't argue. I took the tray. And I smiled. The house sat on a hill outside Austin, the kind of place people slowed down to look at when they drove by. White stone-wide windows, a long driveway lined with trimmed oaks. My father had bought it 5 years ago after his company went public. He'd invited half the city that night, investors, politicians, a few military names I recognized from articles and briefings, including the general. I hadn't known he'd be there until I saw him across the room, tall, composed, speaking quietly with a small group near the bar, 4 stars on his shoulders, the kind of presence that shifts a room without trying. I'd kept my distance. Not because I was intimidated, because I was working. "White wine?" I'd asked a man near the piano. "Thank you," he said, taking a glass. His eyes flicked to my uniform. "You in the service?" "Yes, sir." He nodded, approving. "Good, good." Then he turned back to his conversation. That was the night in a sentence. I moved from group to group, refilled glasses, stepped around conversations that had nothing to do with me. My father didn't introduce me. Not as his daughter. Not as anything. 30. I paused, tilted her head again, and gave 2 breaths. Her chest rose slightly this time. That was something. "Come on," I murmured. "Stay with me." When I went back to compressions, I noticed the general had moved closer. Not interfering, just watching, his eyes steady, taking in each movement. "You're centered," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Good depth." I nodded once without looking up. Around us, people had formed a circle, but it wasn't tight anymore. They'd stepped back just like I'd asked. Space, air, room to work. My father hadn't moved. He was still holding that glass. I hadn't planned to come that night. That's the truth. My mother had called a week earlier, her voice softer than usual. "He asked if you'd be there," she said. "Did he?" I'd replied. A pause. "Well, I think he assumes you will be." That sounded more like him. I'd been back stateside for 3 months. Shore duty for the first time in years. The kind of assignment that lets you sleep in a real bed shop for groceries, pretend life is simple again. It doesn't take long to remember it isn't. Just for an hour, my mother added, it would mean a lot. To her, I knew. So I'd said yes. I'd pressed my uniform, checked my ribbons, polished my shoes. Old habits. Respect for the room even if the room didn't return it. Keep your elbows locked, the general said, now still calm. Let your body weight do the work. I've got it, sir, I answered just as steady. He nodded. No correction, just acknowledgement. That mattered. More than anything my father had said all night. EMS is 2 minutes out, someone called from across the room. Good, I said, we'll keep going. I finished another cycle, checked again. A flicker. It was small, barely there. But I felt it. Wait, I said, pressing fingers to her neck. I've got a pulse. The words moved through the room like a shift in weather. She's breathing, someone asked. Not yet, I said, but she's coming back. I adjusted her position, kept her airway open. Stay with me, Margaret, I said, though I hadn't known her name until someone whispered it beside me. Margaret, can you hear me? A shallow inhale. Then another. When the paramedics came in, they moved fast but controlled. One of them glanced at me, then at the general. Status. Pulse regained, I said. Assisted breathing, no obvious trauma. They nodded, taking over with practiced ease. Good work, one of them added quietly. I stepped back finally. My hands were steady, but I could feel the strain in my shoulders now, the dull ache setting in. The room began to breathe again. Conversations returned in low murmurs. The quartet didn't start up, but someone turned the music back on softer this time. I wiped my hands on a napkin someone handed me. And then, for the first time since it started, I looked up. At my father. He was still in the same place. But something had changed. The confidence he wore so easily earlier, the ease of someone who controlled every detail of the night, had slipped. Not completely. Just enough. He met my eyes. Opened his mouth. Closed it again. The general stepped toward me, then adjusting his jacket slightly. Corpsman, he said, not loudly but clearly enough for those nearby to hear. You handled that exactly right. Thank you, sir, I replied. He held my gaze for a second longer. Then he nodded once. That was it. One sentence. One acknowledgement. But in that room, in that moment, it was more than enough. Behind him, I saw my father's hand tighten slightly around his glass. Not shaking. Just still. For the first time all evening, he didn't have anything to say. And I realized, standing there in the middle of his perfect party, that I didn't need him to. I left before the music picked back up. Not in a hurry. Not making a point of it. I simply set the empty tray down on a side table, thanked one of the staff for the napkin, and walked out through the same front door I'd come in. No one stopped me. Outside, the night air felt different, cooler than I expected, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and something distant like rain that hadn't quite decided whether to arrive. The driveway lights cast long shadows across the stone path. Cars lined both sides, polished and quiet, as if they were waiting for something to be resolved before they moved again. I stood there for a moment, letting my shoulders drop. Then I took a breath. My hands were still tingling slightly from the compressions. That always happened. It wasn't nerves, it was muscle memory unwinding, the body letting go after doing exactly what it was trained to do. A voice behind me said, "You did good in there." I turned. My mother stood just inside the doorway, her wrap pulled close around her shoulders. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was seeing her more clearly now. "Thanks," I said. She stepped out onto the porch, closing the door quietly behind her. For a moment, we both looked back through the glass. Inside, people were moving again, conversations restarting in cautious tones. The kind of careful normal that follows something no one quite knows how to talk about. "Your father," she began. I shook my head gently. "It's okay." She studied my face, searching for something hurt, maybe. Or anger. "I didn't say anything," she said softly. "I know." That had always been the way between us. She didn't interfere. She smoothed things over. She hoped things would settle on their own. Sometimes they did. Most times they didn't. He was proud, she added after a moment, almost as if she were convincing herself. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned lightly against the porch railing, looking out toward the long stretch of driveway that led down to the road. I remembered riding my bike there as a kid, trying to make it to the bottom without braking. My father standing at the top once watching, telling me to be careful but not coming down. He didn't look proud, I said finally. My mother's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of her wrap. "He doesn't always know how to show it," she said. I let that sit between us. It wasn't new information. It wasn't wrong either. But it wasn't enough. "I should get going," I said. She nodded, though it took her a second. "Will you call me?" "Yeah," I said, "I will." I meant it. I always did. The drive back into the city was quiet. I kept the windows down for the first few miles, letting the air move through the car. It helped clear my head. The road curved, gently, streetlights spaced far enough apart to leave pockets of darkness in between. I'd driven that route more times than I could count over the years. First as a passenger, then as a teenager eager to leave. Later only when I had to. Tonight felt different. Not lighter, just settled. I stopped at a red light near the edge of town and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The uniform still sat exactly as it should. No wrinkles, no signs of what had just happened. That was part of the job. You do the work. Then you move on. People assume decisions like mine happen all at once. That one day you wake up and say, I'm going to join the military, and everything falls into place from there. It's not like that. At least it wasn't for me. I remember the first time I told my father I was thinking about it. We were sitting at the kitchen table in the old house before the company went public before the move. He had a stack of papers in front of him, numbers and projections, things that mattered to him in a way I didn't fully understand back then. I'm considering enlisting, I said. He didn't look up right away. When he did, his expression was calm. Too calm. In what capacity, he asked. Medical, I said. Corpsman training. He leaned back slightly, folding his hands. Why, he asked. It wasn't curiosity. It was evaluation. I want to do something that matters, I said. He held my gaze for a moment, then gave a small nod as if acknowledging a point in a discussion. There are many ways to matter, he said. Some of them don't involve putting yourself in unnecessary danger. I've thought about it, I said. I'm sure you have. That was his way of saying he didn't agree without raising his voice. What about school, he added. Business, law. You're capable of more than that. That in his language covered anything he didn't consider strategic. It's not less, I said quietly. It's just different. He didn't respond. Instead, he picked up his pen again and returned to his papers. Conversation over. I went anyway. Training wasn't what I expected. It was harder. Not just physically, though, that part was real enough, but in the way it stripped things down. You learn quickly what matters and what doesn't. There isn't much room for anything in between. The first time I had to perform CPR in training, my hands shook. Not from fear. From the weight of it. An instructor stood over me, watching every movement. Lock your elbows, he said. Use your body weight. You don't hesitate, not ever. I nodded, adjusting my position. Again, he said. We practiced until the motion felt automatic, until the counting ran in the background of everything else. 1, 2, 3. It became part of me. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, pulling me back to the present. A message. From an unknown number. I glanced at it at the next stoplight. This is General Harris. I wanted to commend your actions this evening. Outstanding work. I read it twice. Then a third time. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I did. And because it was simple. Direct. No extra words. I typed back. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job. I hesitated for a second, then hit send. A moment later, 3 dots appeared. That's exactly the point. I let out a small breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then I set the phone down and drove on. By the time I reached my apartment, the city had settled into its usual rhythm. A few lights still on in neighboring buildings. A couple walking a dog down the sidewalk. Ordinary things. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment in the quiet. The night replayed itself in pieces. The tray. The words. The moment on the floor. The general's voice. My father's silence. I didn't feel victorious. That's the thing people don't always understand. There wasn't a sense of winning. Just a kind of clarity. I opened the car door and stepped out. Tomorrow things would go back to normal. Work, routine, the steady pace of days that don't make headlines. But something had shifted. Not in the world. In me. And maybe in time in him. People hear the word medic and picture a bag with a red cross on it. Bandages, maybe a stethoscope, someone who shows up after the hard part is over. That's not how it works. Not where I trained. Not where I served. The first lesson they teach you isn't about tools. It's about time. You don't have it, our instructor said on day one, pacing in front of a line of us still trying to figure out how to stand at attention without locking our knees. You think you do, you don't. He stopped in front of me. When something goes wrong, you act. Not after you think about it. Not after you ask permission. You act. He tapped his watch. Seconds, he said. That's what you're working with. Training started before sunrise and didn't end when the sun went down. We learned how to move fast without rushing, how to see what mattered and ignore what didn't, how to keep your hands steady when everything else around you wasn't. They didn't ease us into it. They dropped us in. Simulations first. A mannequin on the floor, no pulse. Go, the instructor said. You move. Check airway, check breathing, start compressions. 1, 2, 3. At first it feels mechanical, like you're following a list. Then they start adding noise. Shouting, alarms, people talking over each other. You're losing him. Do something. Medic. Your job is to ignore all of it. Focus. Hands, pressure, rhythm. 1, 2, 3. They make it harder. Lights off, flashing strobes, someone grabbing your shoulder. Is he going to make it? You don't answer. You keep going. The first time it wasn't a simulation, I knew the difference before I even saw him. It's in the air. A kind of stillness that doesn't belong. We were stateside part of a joint training exercise, routine, controlled. Until it wasn't. A soldier went down during a drill, no dramatic fall, just stopped. By the time I reached him, someone was already calling for help. He's not breathing, they said. I dropped to my knees, hands in place. 1, 2, 3. There's a moment right at the beginning where your mind tries to catch up, to ask questions, to figure out what happened. You don't let it. You stay with what you know. Pressure, depth, count. 1, 2, 3. Someone knelt beside me ready with equipment, another cleared space. No one panicked. That's the difference training makes. We worked together without talking much. Minutes passed. Or seconds. It's hard to tell. Then, a breath. Small, shallow. But there. Pulse, I said. The word felt solid in my mouth. We stabilized him, got him on a stretcher, sent him out. Later, someone told me he made it. I didn't celebrate. I just wrote the report. You learn over time that the job isn't about being the hero. It's about being the one who moves when no one else does. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. You carry both. My father never asked about any of it. Not really. He'd ask where I was stationed, how long I'd be gone, when I'd be back. Logistics. Timelines. Things that fit into a calendar. Once after I'd been in for about a year, he asked, "Are you learning anything useful?" I remember that clearly. We were on the phone. I was sitting on a bench outside the barracks watching the sun come up over a row of low buildings that all looked the same. Yes, I said. Like what? I thought about explaining. About telling him how to recognize when someone's airway is blocked. How to stop bleeding with whatever you have on hand. How to stay calm when everything around you isn't. Instead, I said how to help people. There was a pause. I see, he said. He didn't ask anything else. Back at my apartment the next morning, I woke up early out of habit. The light through the blinds was soft, the kind that makes everything look a little slower than it is. I made coffee, sat at the small table by the window. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the general. I'd like to put in a formal commendation, if that's all right with you. I stared at the screen for a moment. Formal commendations aren't something you chase. They're something that happen around you. Yes, sir, thank you, I typed back. A few seconds later. Well earned. I set the phone down. Took a sip of coffee. Looked out at the street below. People were starting their day, walking to cars, heading to work, doing the ordinary things that fill up most of life. That's what the job is for. Those ordinary moments. Keeping them going. Around noon I got another message. This one from my mother. She's stable, the woman from last night. Her husband called the house. He wanted to thank you. I read it twice. Then I replied, I'm glad she's okay. A moment later, your father is home. That was all she said. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what there was to say. In training, they tell you something else too. It's not in the manuals. It's not written down anywhere official. But you hear it enough that it sticks. People will underestimate you, one of my instructors said once, leaning against a wall after a long day. Not because you can't do the job, because they don't understand it. He shrugged. That's fine, understanding isn't required. He pushed off the wall, heading toward the door. Doing it is... I finished my coffee. Got dressed. Checked my gear out of habit, even though I wasn't deploying anywhere that day. Then I picked up my phone again. Scrolled to my father's name. Paused. Then locked the screen. Not yet. Some things don't need to be rushed. Some things are better left to settle on their own. By mid-afternoon, the apartment felt too quiet. That happens sometimes after a night like that. Not because anything is wrong, but because everything is still settling. Your body's caught up, but your mind hasn't quite finished sorting it out. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters that were already clean, checked my phone more than I needed to. Nothing new. Around 3, I stepped outside. The air had warmed up, a few clouds drifting slow across a bright Texas sky. Neighbors going about their day, someone mowing a lawn, a kid riding a bike in uneven circles, a woman walking her dog past the row of mailboxes. Ordinary. It grounded me. I walked a few blocks, hands in my pockets, letting the rhythm of it settle things further. Past a small diner I'd been meaning to try, past a hardware store with a faded sign, places that had been there long before I arrived and would be there long after. Life moves on. It always does. The call came just as I was heading back. Ma'am. Yes. This is Travis County EMS. We spoke briefly last night at the residence on Barton Creek Road. I leaned lightly against the side of a parked car. Yes, I remember. We wanted to update you on the patient you assisted. Margaret. She's stable, he said. They've got her at St. David's, cardiac event. You bought her the time she needed. I closed my eyes for a second. Thank you, I said. No thank you, he replied. We see a lot of situations where people hesitate. That didn't happen last night. No, I said quietly, it didn't. We ended the call. I stood there a moment longer, then pushed off the car and headed home. That evening, I sat down with a legal pad and wrote out what I remembered. Not because anyone had asked me to. Because that's what you do. Time, position, initial condition, actions taken. I wrote in clear, steady lines. No pulse, no breathing. Initiated CPR. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Continued until pulse regained. Simple. Accurate. Enough. When I finished, I set the pen down and looked at the page. There's a kind of peace in writing things down like that. It puts edges around an event. Keeps it from spreading into everything else. Around 7, my phone buzzed again. My mother. I let it ring once more than usual before answering. Hi, I said. Hi, she replied. Her voice sounded steadier than the night before. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. No, I said. I was just at home. A pause. I spoke to Margaret's husband, she said. He called again this afternoon. He was very grateful. I'm glad, I said. He said the doctors told him that if no one had started compressions when you did... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. How's she doing, I asked. Stable. They're monitoring her. He thinks she'll be able to come home in a few days. That's good. Another pause. He also asked for your number, she added. I thought about that. Did you give it to him? No, she said. I told him I'd ask first. Thank you. If you're comfortable, I can pass it along. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. That's fine. I will, she said. We sat in silence for a moment. There was something else there. I could hear it. Your father, she began again. I exhaled softly. Yeah. He hasn't said much today, she said. He canceled his meetings. That got my attention. He never does that, I said. I know. What is he doing? Walking, she said. Around the house, outside, just walking. I pictured it. The long driveway, the back patio, the rooms that were too large for quiet. He asked about you, she added. I didn't respond right away. What did he ask? I said finally. He wanted to know where you learned to do that, she said. Last night. I let out a small breath. What did you tell him? The truth, she said, that you've been doing it for years. Did he say anything? No, she said. He just nodded. After we hung up, I sat for a while with that. Not the praise. Not the outcome. The question. Where did you learn to do that? It was the first time I could remember him asking anything about what I actually did. Not where. Not when. What? It was a small shift. But it was there. The next morning I reported in for my scheduled duty. The base was quiet in that familiar way, ordered, efficient, a place where everyone knew their role and did it without needing to be told twice. I checked in with the senior chief, reviewed the day's assignments, and moved through the routine that had become second nature. Vitals. Charts. Follow-ups. Nothing dramatic. That's most days. And that's a good thing. Around mid-morning, one of the younger sailors approached me. "Hey," he said, a little hesitant. "You were at that event last night, right? The one off Barton Creek." I looked up from the chart I was reviewing. I was. "I saw something about it this morning," he said. "Someone posted a clip. Not the whole thing, just part of it." I felt a small tightening in my chest. "What part?" I asked. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and turned the screen toward me. It was shaky footage. A circle of people, movement, voices. And then, me. On the floor. Counting. Hands steady. The general stepping into frame. No audio on his words. Just the moment. I watched for a few seconds, then handed the phone back. "That's me," I said. "Yeah," he said, "it's something." "It's just the job," I replied. He nodded, though I could tell he didn't fully understand. That was all right. He didn't need to. By the end of the day, the clip had spread. Not everywhere, but enough. Enough that people were talking about it in low voices in hallways. Enough that a few extra nods came my way. Enough that the story had started to move beyond the room it happened in. I didn't chase it. I didn't avoid it. I let it pass through. That evening, as I was packing up to leave, my phone buzzed again. A text. From my father. I stared at the name for a long moment. Then I opened it. "Can we talk?" No extra words, no explanation. Just that. I read it once. Then again. Outside, the sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the base. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Not answering right away. Not ignoring it either. Some conversations matter more when you take your time walking into them. I didn't answer my father that night. Not because I was avoiding him. Because I wanted the moment to settle into something real before we tried to talk over it. Too soon, and it would turn into what it had always been, him explaining me, listening, nothing changing. Some things need a little space to take shape. The next morning, I was already halfway through my shift when I got the message. "Please report to command at 1100, dress uniform." No explanation. There rarely is. I checked the time, enough to finish what I was doing, clean up and change. Dress uniform always meant something formal, not routine, not day-to-day. I didn't ask questions. I finished my rounds, handed off my notes, and headed to the locker room. Standing in front of the mirror, I adjusted my jacket. Every line in place, ribbons aligned, shoes already polished. I'd worn this uniform the night of the party. But this felt different. Not because of how it looked. Because of what it carried with it now. I took a breath. Then I stepped out. Command was in a low building near the center of base. Clean lines, no excess. The kind of place where things happen quietly but matter. A petty officer met me at the entrance. "Ma'am," he said, nodding, "they're expecting you." I followed him down a hallway that smelled faintly of polish and paper. We stopped outside a conference room. He knocked once, then opened the door. "Corpsman on deck." I stepped inside. There were 5 people in the room. 2 I recognized from the medical unit. 1 from command. And at the far end of the table, the general. He stood when I entered. Not abruptly, not formally. Just stood. "Corpsman," he said with the same calm tone I'd heard the night before. "Sir," I replied, stepping forward. "Please," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Have a seat." I did. The others remained standing for a moment longer, then took their seats as well. A folder lay on the table in front of me. Closed. The general rested his hands lightly on the back of his chair. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "You've already given more than enough of it this week." There was a slight shift in the room, attention tightening, everyone aware this wasn't routine. I reviewed the reports, he continued. From EMS, from the hospital, from your command. He paused, and I watched the footage. I kept my expression steady. Yes, sir. You acted immediately, he said. You maintained proper technique under pressure. You gave that patient the time she needed. He wasn't praising. He was stating facts. That mattered more. That's your training, he said. Yes, sir. And your judgment. I didn't answer that. He let the silence sit for a moment. Then he nodded slightly as if confirming something to himself. Open the folder, he said. I reached forward and did. Inside was a single document. Formal, clean, precise. A commendation. I read the first line, then the second. My name. My unit. A summary of actions taken. Recognition of performance. I didn't rush through it. I took my time. When I finished, I closed the folder gently. Sir, I said. That's for you, he replied. Official recognition. It will be entered into your record. Thank you. He inclined his head slightly. Then, after a brief pause, he said something that wasn't written anywhere on that page. Moments like that don't announce themselves, he said. They don't give you time to prepare. You either step in or you don't. His gaze held mine. You did. I nodded once. Yes, sir. He took a breath, then shifted slightly as if moving from formal to something else still controlled but more personal. I spoke with the patient's family this morning, he said. She's awake, alert, asking questions. A small release in my chest. That's good to hear, sir. They asked about you, he added. I told them what I'm telling you now. I waited. That you did your job, he said. Exactly the way it's meant to be done. There it was again. Not heroics, not exaggeration. Just the truth. The meeting ended shortly after. No ceremony, no applause. Just a few nods, a handshake, and the quiet understanding that something had been acknowledged. As I stood to leave, the general stepped slightly to the side, allowing the others to move past us. Corpsman, he said. I stopped. Yes, sir. He lowered his voice just enough that it stayed between us. There will be people who misunderstand what you do, he said. That doesn't change its value. I held his gaze. No, sir. He studied me for a moment longer. Then he gave a single decisive nod. That will be all. Outside, the sunlight felt sharper, clearer. I walked across the base at an easy pace, the folder tucked under my arm. No rush. No need to check my phone. Just walking. It buzzed anyway. I didn't look at it right away. I waited until I reached the shade of a tree near the edge of the lot. Then I pulled it out. My father. I heard you're being recognized today. I read the message once. Then again. There was no question in it. Just information. I typed back. Yes. The reply came quicker this time. Can we meet? I stared at the screen. The same words as the night before. But they felt different now. Less uncertain. More deliberate. I thought about the long driveway, the quiet rooms, the way he'd stood there, glass in hand, watching something he hadn't expected. I thought about the question my mother had told me he asked. Where did you learn to do that? I typed. Tomorrow, coffee. A pause. Then, all right. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and continued walking. No rush. No need to rehearse what I would say. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. That part had already happened. Quietly. On a marble floor. In front of a room that had gone still. For the first time since the party, I felt something settle fully into place. Not pride. Not relief. Something steadier. A sense that whatever came next wouldn't need to be forced. It would just unfold. We met at a place I'd passed 100 times and never gone in. A small coffee shop off a side street, the kind with a chalkboard menu and a bell that rang softly when you opened the door. Nothing polished, no valet, no long driveway. Neutral ground. I arrived early. Not to prepare, just to sit. I ordered black coffee, took a table near the window and watched the street. A couple walking past. A delivery truck idling at the curb. A man reading a newspaper 2 tables over, turning each page with care. Ordinary. It steadied me. My father walked in 10 minutes later. He paused just inside the door, adjusting slightly as his eyes moved across the room. He wasn't used to places like this. It showed not in discomfort exactly, but in the way he measured the space. Then he saw me. He nodded once. I stood. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. He sat across from me, placing his phone face down on the table. No glass, no audience, no room to control. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was even. Measured. "I said I would," I replied. A server approached. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Coffee," he said, "black." She nodded and stepped away. Silence settled between us. Not heavy. Just present. "I spoke to the general," he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "You did?" "He called," my father replied, "this morning." I hadn't expected that. "What did he say?" I asked. "He said you handled yourself well," my father said, "that you were prepared." I almost smiled. That sounds like him. My father nodded. Another pause. "I also spoke to the patient's husband," he added, "Margaret's husband." I leaned back slightly. "He was very grateful," my father continued. "He said—" He hesitated, searching for the exact words. "He said you gave him more time with his wife." I let that sit. It mattered. More than anything that had been said at the party. "I'm glad she's okay," I said. "So am I," he replied. The server returned with his coffee. He thanked her. Waited until she left. Then he looked at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. "I was wrong," he said. No build-up. No explanation. Just that. I didn't respond right away, because I wanted to hear what came after. He took a breath. "I didn't understand what you do," he said. "I thought I did. I didn't." I nodded once. "That's fair," I said. "It's not," he replied quietly. "Not entirely." Another pause. "I reduced it," he continued, "simplified it, put it in terms I was comfortable with." "Business terms," I said. "Yes." He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, not drinking it yet. "I've spent my life measuring value in outcomes, I can see," he said. "Numbers, growth, control." He glanced out the window briefly, then back. "What you do doesn't fit that." "No," I said, "it doesn't." He exhaled slowly. "When I saw you on that floor," he said, "I realized something." I waited. "I didn't know what to do," he said. There it was. Not about me. About him. "The room didn't know what to do," I said. "That's true," he replied, "but I'm used to being the one who does." I nodded. "I know." He held my gaze. "And I wasn't," he said. "No defensiveness. No excuse. Just fact." "That happens," I said. He gave a small, almost humorless smile. "I don't like it," he admitted. "I didn't expect you to." We sat with that for a moment. Then he said something I hadn't heard from him in a long time. "Where did you learn to do that?" Not as a challenge. Not as a test. As a question. I answered it. "Training," I said. "Repetition. Situations where you don't get to hesitate." He listened. Didn't interrupt. "First, you learn the steps," I continued. "Then you learn to trust them. Then you learn to trust yourself." He nodded slowly. "And the fear?" he asked. "It's there," I said. "You just don't let it drive." He considered that. Then nodded again. "I called you a glorified medic," he said after a moment. He didn't soften the words. He didn't pretend they hadn't been said. "Yes," I replied. "That was dismissive," he said. "Yes," I said again. Another pause. "I won't do that again," he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't an apology wrapped in emotion. It was a decision. I accepted it the same way. "Okay," I said. We finished our coffee. Not in a rush. Not dragging it out. At one point he asked about my schedule, not to control it, just to understand. I told him. He nodded. We spoke about my mother, about the house, about small things that had been absent for a long time. Nothing forced. Nothing rehearsed. When we stood to leave, he hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he did something simple. He placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. Not firm. Not performative. Just there. "I'm glad you came," he said. "So am I," replied. He nodded. Then he walked out into the street, blending into the movement of people who had no idea who he was. For once, that didn't seem to bother him. I watched him go. Then I turned in the opposite direction and started walking. No rush. No wait. Just the steady rhythm of steps on pavement. That night my phone buzzed once more. A message from my mother. How did it go? I typed back. It was different. A moment later, different is good. I smiled slightly. Set the phone down. And let the quiet settle in. A week passed. Not the kind that stands out. No headlines, no interruptions. Just a series of ordinary days, work routine, the steady rhythm that carries most of life without asking for attention. That's where things change usually. Not in the moment everyone talks about. After. Margaret came home on a Thursday. I didn't go to see her right away. That wasn't my place. What I'd done belonged to that night, to that floor, to those few minutes that mattered. But her husband called again. His voice was steadier this time, tired but lighter. She's asking about you, he said. She doesn't remember much, just that someone was there. That's enough, I replied. He paused. You gave us more time, he said again. I didn't correct him. I didn't expand on it. You're welcome, I said. We left it there. Oh. The commendation was processed quietly. No ceremony. No speech. Just a document added to my record, a line that would sit among others, each one marking a moment that had already passed. That's how most of it works. You do the job. It gets noted. You move on. My father called on Sunday. Not a text. A call. I answered on the second ring. Hi, I said. Hi, he replied. There was a small shift in his voice, less edge, less distance. I spoke to Margaret's husband again, he said. They're doing well. That's good, I said. It is. A pause. I wanted to tell you that, he added. And to ask if you'd be willing to come by next weekend. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Is there something going on, I asked. No, he said, nothing formal. Another pause. Just dinner. Simple. No audience. No performance. I considered it. All right, I said, I can do that. Good, he replied. We didn't fill the silence with extra words. We didn't need to. I'll see you then, he said. See you then. Dinner was quiet. Not empty. Just measured. My mother had set the table the way she always did, careful, intentional, a small vase in the center, plates aligned. We sat. We ate. We talked about small things first. The weather. A neighbor who had moved. A repair that needed to be done on the back fence. Ordinary. It gave the space time to settle. Halfway through the meal, my father set his fork down. I've been thinking, he said. I looked up. So have I replied. A faint smile crossed his face. I imagine you have, he said. He folded his hands on the table. I spent a long time believing that if I couldn't measure something, it wasn't significant, he said. That if it didn't show up in a report or a balance sheet, it was secondary. I nodded. I know. He met my eyes. I don't believe that anymore, he said. It wasn't said loudly. It wasn't emphasized. But it landed. All right, I said. I'm still learning how to understand what you do, he continued, but I'm not dismissing it anymore. That's a good place to start, I said. He nodded. Yes, he agreed, I think it is. After dinner, we moved to the living room. No music. No guests. Just the three of us. At one point, my mother excused herself to clear the dishes, leaving us alone. My father looked at the bookshelf across the room, then back at me. I told someone this week that my daughter is in the Navy, he said. I waited. I didn't add anything to it, he said. I didn't qualify it. I didn't explain it away. I let a small breath out. That's enough, I said. He nodded once. Yes, he said, I think it is. When I left that night, the driveway looked the same as it always had. The lights. The trees. The long stretch leading down to the road. But it felt different. Not because the place had changed. Because something in it had. On the drive home, I thought about the moment on the floor. The count. The breath. The way the room had gone still. And the sentence that had followed. You're doing it right. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to be. But it had shifted everything that needed shifting. Not just for me. For him. People talk about revenge like it's something loud. Something that announces itself. Something that leaves no doubt about who won. That's not how it felt. There was no victory. No triumph. Just alignment. A moment where what I did and who I was finally matched in a way that didn't need to be explained. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had someone reduce what you do to something smaller than it is, you don't need to argue. You don't need to convince. You just need to be ready when it matters. Do the work. Hold the line. Let the moment speak for you. And when it does, let it be enough.